Is everybody ready to start the meeting? Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny panel. During the live broadcast, members and officers are asked to please ensure that mobile phones are placed in silent mode and that the microphones are switched off when not in use. Would member services please report any apologies for absence?
Good morning. We've got apologies for Councillor Gerstner and Councillor Hay.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, we are being asked to approve the public minutes at pages 3 to 12 of the public agenda pack as a correct record of the meeting which took place on the 15th of January 24. Can I ask any member who does not agree with the minutes to indicate that now? I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record of the meeting, and so they are now agreed. Agenda item 3, there are no urgent items for consideration today. Moving on to agenda 4. Agenda 4 is to receive any declarations of interest under the local code of conduct or any interest under the code of conduct on planning matters in respect of any items to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, please can you inform the meeting now? No hands raised. No, oh, I have. Sorry.
Just to notify that under item 5, that in my day job I have frequent dealings with Clarion Housing. I don't believe it will constitute conflict of interest, but I just want to make it known in case any questions come up later in the meeting.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Right, so we move on now to agenda item 5, which is to receive a presentation from Clarion. I'd like to welcome, I'll name you all. Actually, can you name yourselves? Because I've got a list, but I can't identify who's who, so.
I'll start. Yeah, morning. I'm Kirsten Wildman. I'm the Regional Director of Housing for Clarion, covering our North and East regions. Very nice to meet you all.
Could have left that on. Morning, so I'm Paul Norman. I'm the Director of Strategic Asset Management at Clarion.
Sally Greedham, I'm Head of Operations at Clarion, so I work with the housing teams based in this area.
Good morning, my name is Carl Grimmer. I'm the Regional Director for Clarion Response, covering the East region, and we're the repairs and maintenance arm of the housing group.
I'm Dan Reid. I'm the Regional Director of Partnerships, working in the Development Department, looking after building new homes.
And I'm Yvonne Ogden. I'm the Communities Manager for Clarion Futures. We're the charitable foundation of the housing group.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to kick us off. So I'm going to talk this morning just to give you a very quick overview of things that are happening within the housing sector, really. So I'm going to talk to you about consumer standards and then what Clarion are doing about the new consumer standards with regards to, and that's called Clarion Commitments. So very, very quick overview. You may or may not be aware of this, but the new Social Housing Regulation Act was an Act of Parliament that was introduced, introducing new measures to improve the standard, safety and operation of social housing. So the bill was introduced in the House of Lords in June 2022, and it received royal assent just over a year later in July 23. So the aim of the Act was to increase the regulation of social landlords and put in place new rules for protecting tenants from serious hazards. many of the provisions of the Act are responses to the tragedy of the 2017 Grenfell Tower fire, and then the death of Awab Ishak, the 2-year-old little boy who died in 2020 from exposure to serious mould. So the Act strengthens the role of the regulator of social housing, allowing them to take action against social landlords before people are put at risk, and it also allows them to hold landlords to account with regular inspections. It will introduce new social housing consumer standards, and it gives the Secretary of State the power to require landlords to investigate and rectify any serious health hazards in properties. So from April of this year, there are going to be 4 new consumer standards which specifically set out the expectations and outcomes of all registered landlords, and registered providers will be expected to achieve those. There's also a code of practice in relation to the code of standards and tenant satisfaction measures, and then there will be regular consumer inspections. So the aim of the Act is to provide greater transparency for tenants and also allows them to hold their landlord to account. The Act gives the Housing Ombudsman the power to issue complaint handling code and puts that on a statutory footing. And the Housing Ombudsman will also have the power to instruct social landlords to measure their service against the Housing Ombudsman guidance, especially around issues such as damp and mould. So just moving on, this slide here just gives you a little bit about the vision for the new consumer regulation. So this has been in consultation for some time and was only finalised on Thursday last week. So Clarion, we've been busy reviewing to check that nothing's changed from the original consultation plan. But the key visions are, so there's themes that are focused around safety, standards, complaints, fairness, respect, diversity, making sure that customers understand the way that their landlords do things, and also giving customers confidence in their landlord. So the new regime starts from April this year, and as I said earlier, there are 4 consumer standards. Underpinning all of that, there are cross-cutting themes around data and customer insight. So that's about whether landlords know what outcomes are expected to be achieved across the diverse spectrum of their customers, that, and it's about making sure that landlords have the correct data and they have access to the data they need to deliver their services. Then there's a theme around accessibility. And that's about making sure that all of our customers have fair access to achieve and receive good services. And then there's assurance, so landlords need to know that they're able to provide assurance of all of these things. Then there's a theme around improvement, so if different groups of customers are expressing different levels of satisfaction, it's about landlords knowing why and having an action plan to address this. And then finally, there's assurance and oversight, which is about landlords knowing their services and making sure that they're complying with the new Act. So at Clarion, as I've said, we've spent quite a lot of time getting ready for the new consumer regulations. So as part of that, we've reviewed our corporate and customer strategy. And here you can see our customer strategy. From that, we've developed a number of key projects which will allow us to meet the new requirements. We've been doing some benchmarking against the sector and G15 colleagues. We've carried out full gap analysis and audit of our service to make sure that we're going to meet the requirements, and we'll be looking at sort of doing things like mock inspections in the next couple of months prior to any sort of inspection from the regulator. So the recurrent messages from the sector and customers are around listening and respect. There's around professionalism, so about the culture of the organisation, about the behaviour of staff, attitudes, and around staff being professional, around themes around knowing our customers, so making sure that we're seeing our customers holistically and that we're understanding their experience and perspective, and then about taking ownership and responsibility. So our response to this has been to develop our Clarion commitments, which are central to our service offers. And our Clarion commitments are a statement of our service offer, which is one of the pillars of our new customer strategy. So there are 6 overarching commitments within our Clarion commitments that we expect all of our staff to understand, adopt and embed in their day-to-day work. So the Clarion commitments reflect what we know are the most important issues for our residents. So there's 29 specific commitments under these, and we are publishing performance on a monthly basis on our website. So do, if you get 5 minutes, log on and have a look at those, and you can see how we're performing against those, how our performance is measuring against those commitments. And that is me done. Over to Paul, who's going to talk to you about 2050.
Thanks, Kirsten. So this is Clarion 2050. This is our new group asset management strategy. It was signed off a few months ago. We launched it internally last Tuesday. You're the first external body to actually see this. So Clarion 2050 is made up of 6 strategic pillars. First one being right homes, right location. Previously, our strategy has looked, since our merger from Circle Housing and Affinity Sutton back in 2016, about realigning our footprint, and there's been a number of successful in-sector transfers that have brought our footprint into a line. There's a further 3 or 4 years of that to continue through to, I think, 2029. But the right homes, right location is starting to look at actually where we are going to keep our homes and actually making sure those homes are the right type of homes for us. Making sure that not just for us, but for the customers, the long-term sustainability, the financial well-being of customers in those homes is at the centre of that strategy, making sure that the homes we provide to customers, as I say, are not only in the right homes, but also in the right locations. Understanding our homes is the other underpinning part of that. Kirsten touched on what the consumer standards are asking us to look at now from a respect of understanding our customers. I think we've taken the view that you can't begin to understand your customer unless you understand the home they live in. There's a strategy that sits underneath understanding our homes, which is an asset condition strategy that goes beyond the traditional stock condition surveys, where we've done drone surveys of all of our high-storey blocks and some of our difficult-to-manage properties. We've done a range of EPC surveys and other things, but we've gone way beyond what's required of us, but to continue to look at how we understand the homes and start overlaying that with the customers that live in it, to really start unpicking how we can make best use of those assets and work with our customers. Safe homes kind of speaks for itself. It's predominantly looking after the compliance of our homes. A big part of this is the leaks, condensation, damp and mould priorities that we've now got. That strategy was in place about a year ago. It's been further enhanced with obviously regulations that are going through now, and we'll continue to shape that as those regulations become more clear and finalised. Sustainable homes, and actually this particular strand has been shaped by an awful lot of the work that we've done with Fenland through the social housing and decarbonisation programme, which I think Carl will touch on a bit later. Has really helped us shape what the future of our sustainable homes is going to look like, and how we achieve net zero by 2050. There's an awful lot of targets that sit beneath this, but essentially our definition of a net zero home is taking out all the fossil fuel, but you have to do that in a way where the customer is not worse off. You cannot just take out the gas boiler and put in an electric heat source. You have to make sure that the fabric means that you can do that where the customer is at best or worst the same off, but what we look to do is achieve a better financial outcome for them. Place shaping, again, when you look at some of the tenant satisfaction measures, this is all about expectation, and this is essentially the walk to the door and about how we bring asset and communities together. Looking at our estates and the wider external spaces programme, looking at how we bring nature, promoting mental well-being with our customers, and how we really generate community, whether it's a close-knit estate in the traditional sense or potentially more widely spread, particularly when you look at the portfolio we have out here in Fenland. It's how we create communities in a non-traditional way. And the last one, which is financially strong. So important for 2 things. One, delivering this strategy will ensure that we're here for the long term, will make us financially strong and has a clear programme of how we will bring our assets to the standards we've got. But equally, we need to be financially strong to do this. As I'm sure you can all appreciate, the financial pressures that we're all under at the moment are pretty immense. We're all working as best we can with what we've got. And this strategy, because it's long-term, enables us to flex and move with those short-term pressures. That means we can still work towards those final goals set out in the strategy. Thank you. I think I'm passing on to Sally.
So Paul and Kirsten have given you the big picture stuff at Clarion. I'm going to bring it a little bit more local now and start talking about delivery of our services at a local level. So just a reminder to start with, we've got about over 4,000 properties in the Fenland area. Most of those are what we classify as general needs stock. So that's the stock that we manage and let to, for example, people on the housing register. Of course, the vast majority of that stock is stock that used to belong to Fenland District Council until it was transferred in 2007. So most of that stock is getting a bit old now. It's 50, 60, 70 years old. So that's some of the pressures that we're starting to feel in terms of day-to-day management. You asked a couple of questions about how we manage our empty homes, so we've just got a slide specifically focusing on that. We're currently looking to let about a similar number of homes that we did last year, so in terms of turnover, it's been about the same now this year compared to last year. I've also included a slide on there about the occupation of our homes. So you can manage empty homes in lots of different ways. We choose to manage it in what we call occupancy levels. So we aim to ensure obviously as many of our homes as occupied as possible. The target numbers on there are on the Clarion commitment, so you can see on a monthly basis how we're performing occupancy wise. So currently we're above where our target, which is great, but we have had a few challenges with relets in Fenland, and that, we're going to pick that up throughout the presentation, some of those challenges. But in terms of day-to-day target, we're actually achieving our occupancy. You also asked us just to give a little bit of a focus on how we manage antisocial behaviour, so just a quick overview of that. So whenever we get a report of antisocial behaviour from one of our customers, the first thing we do, we'll take details of that and we'll try and do a risk assessment to determine what's next. So something that is where a customer is at fear of violence, so for example domestic abuse, we'll respond within 24 hours. If it's a complaint of noise nuisance, we'll respond within 5 days. And at that point we'll contact the complainant and agree an action plan. So we'll agree with them what action we're going to take, and we may ask them to take a few steps as well. For example, typically we might ask them to keep a diary sheet of how often the nuisance is occurring. About 99% of our antisocial behaviour cases, we will around talking to all parties. So we'll talk to the complainant, we might talk to the person they're complaining about, we'll try and find a resolution in that way. We'll regularly work with other agencies. So for example, I think one of the questions you asked was how we deal with drug dealing. The first thing we will always do is ask the complainant to report any crime to the police. So we will, signpost people to speak to the police to report things like drug dealing, and we'll often work in partnership in more challenging cases. So the police might take some action, and that will enable us to take our own action. We might, as I say, we'll talk to neighbours. We might offer things like mediation. So when there's particularly sort of challenging disputes between customers, we might offer mediation services to try and find a resolution. In some cases we will take legal action, but we do consider it the last resort for various reasons. Legal action options available to us are injunctions, and worst case scenario would be in a possession order, which there's quite a high bar set for us to consider that, not least because we've got to take a case to court, and they'll only consider cases where we've had to pull together quite a considerable amount of evidence. So the vast majority of our cases, we work with the complainant, we work with the person they complain about and other agencies in order to try and find a resolution. And I think that's over to Carl.
As sort of mentioned earlier on, I'm the Regional Director for the East, and I cover all the repairs and maintenance arm of Clarion. So just to give you some background around our operating model, I cover the whole of the East region, which covers 6 counties. It's broken into 7 areas, but 2 of those areas, my East Area 5 and East Area 6, are bespoke to the Fenland stock, along with some other properties as well. That's managed by 2 area managers, a dedicated planning team as well, and that includes, when fully recruited to, 34 directly employed operatives who will deliver all of the day-to-day repairs and the empty homes or the void properties, using subcontractor support where required, particularly for specialist works or anything where we've got a peak in demand. Just to give you some high-level information on some of our performance, you might hear the term WIP mentioned quite frequently. That's WIP, and it stands for our work in progress. So what that means is all the active jobs that we currently have open for residents in the area, and that might be something we're working on currently or that are programmed in and appointed for the future. In the Fenland area, we currently have around 1,000 jobs this morning, active jobs. To put that into some context, that's about 20 working days, as we deliver we deliver around 50 to 60 jobs a day internally. That equates to 1 job every 10 minutes in effect. So every 10 minutes we're completing a repair to a home in our Fenland stock. I think ideally 1,000 is a little bit too high, and I'm aiming to try and get that down over the next couple of months to around 750 jobs. That's an ideal number for us. It gives 14, 15 days work. Anything below that and it becomes problematic in ensuring that the operatives' diaries are managed and we can get the most efficient service from them. Some of the other couple of key issues, we look at what we term aged jobs as well into 2 categories, and that's over 60-day-old jobs and over 90-day-old jobs. As of this morning, we had 6 jobs that are over 90 days old. 2 of those link into legal disrepair claims, but the other 4 are into some quite complex drainage works that we're trying to arrange to get completed. The over 60 jobs, we're running at 34 this morning. The majority of those jobs are linked into specialist materials, particularly around front entrance doors, replacement front entrance doors, which can take up to 8 weeks to order in from initial measure. I think we have had a drive on our productivity. This is nationally, not just locally. Our budgets are set at our guys completing 3.2 jobs per man per day as an average across the business. In Fenland, we're currently at 3.5, when we're improving that slightly, which is some of the highest performance across Clarion, which is really positive. I have got some key KPIs which are on the next slide, which I will go through. Just moving on to empty homes. Empty homes is more of a challenge for us in the Fenland area, being honest. We currently have around 120 vacant homes in Fenland. These are ones that we call active, which we are currently able to work on, or some which are going through some appraisal process to ascertain the cost benefits around it. Our voids are delivered by an in-house service. We've got 4 teams of 2 who are delivering voids across Fenland with subcontractor support as required. Just to put some numbers on that, from April till the end of January, we've returned 177 voids. That's almost 1 per working day that we get back for this area. And 47 of those have been what we term major voids, which are the higher value voids that we either do in-house or we subcontract out. We're currently looking at ways that we can start to bring some of those numbers down, and we do have a subcontractor framework that we can draw on, which is not always the most efficient way for us to do it, and we're currently utilising what we call a DPS service, which stands for Dynamic Purchasing System, where we're out to tender to a number of subcontractors to get the not just the best price but the best service in delivering some of those. We've just awarded the latest version of it, and there'll be 15 voids in Fenland, high value voids that are going out to be completed by these teams. I did want to touch on LCDM a little bit. I know Paul mentioned it earlier, but I think we Clarion, or the Clarion Repairs team, we were very proactive in looking at how we deal with LCDM, and that stands for leaks, condensation, damp and mould. We formed a bespoke team back in December 2022, consisting of 70 operatives nationally, and 13 came from the East region, to address any issues with LCDM cases, and we have a service level agreement of 7 days with doing that, which look at treating the issues, but also identifying what the root causes of those are, so we can put things in place so residents don't have to have a reoccurrence of those issues. Whilst we're now moving into a quieter period, as we start to move into spring and then summer, those number of cases will reduce, but we've still retained a team of 30 nationally, but adopted a hybrid approach now where there's a further 250 who are carrying out day-to-day repairs, but are also fully trained in carrying out works to LCDM cases and looking at the diagnosis around that. Some of the challenges that we've had, I think it's important just to know, is recruitment has been a real difficulty for us, and I'm not sure if any of you have experienced similar issues, but it is very hard for us to get the right person with the right attitude who fits into the team and will be able to interact with our residents the way that we expect them to be able to do. So I'm currently 5 vacancies still in the Fenland area. We've not been fully recruited for the last 12 months, but we're interviewing again this week, and hopefully we'll get some people in. I think recognising that also, though, we've looked at ways that we can minimise that impact moving forward, and we have taken on in September 2 dedicated apprentices to work on the Fenland stock. They started in September and they're currently going through their academic training, linked in with on-site mentoring through our own teams. So that will be for the next 2 years, and we're hopeful they will then develop into a valued member of our team. Subcontractor support has been problematic as well. We do have a national framework of subcontractors that we can draw on, that have gone through quite a rigorous procurement route. It's difficult to get contractors. A lot of these contractors have national coverage, but the coverage here is sparse at times. So we're looking at how we can perhaps engage with more smaller and medium enterprises locally to provide us that support when it's needed. I wanted on this section just to finish off with some real positives, though, for Fenland, I think, and that's around customer satisfaction. Obviously, there are many ways that we can gauge customer satisfaction and obtain feedback from our residents. We use 2 bespoke methods at the moment. One of those is called locales, sometimes referred to as On My Way, and basically it's a text service. So when our operative clicks accept on a job first thing in the morning, that promotes a text to go to the resident to remind them, or say our operative is now on his way. When they're 5 minutes from the property, through a geofence that they will go through, triggers another text to say our operative is only 5 minutes away, gets there, completes the job, and when he completes it, that promotes another text to the resident to say, how was your service? And it allows the resident to score from a 1 to 5 score. From this year, April to date, our locale score in Fenland has been 4.55 out of 5, which is equates to 91%, which is really good nationally. The other method is called the TLF method, and that stands for the leadership factor. And that's an independent organisation who monthly will contact 150 residents randomly in the area who have had work completed on their property and ask for feedback from 1 to 10 on 5 key issues. The Fenland area has achieved 93.3% customer satisfaction year to date. That is the highest nationally for Clarion response, something I'm really proud of, and I think reflects the way that our operatives engage with the residents. So just very quickly on the KPIs, there's some key KPIs there. The top ones are for Clarion response. I did just want to focus on, there's one that we're not doing very well on, which is those completed at first, routine repairs completed at first point of call, which is in the 60s%. We are looking at ways to improve that. It has been linked into some of the recruitment difficulties we've faced, but specifically around certain trades. We are very light on plasterers and roofers as an example. So when works are coming in, we're often having to book that outside of our service level agreement, which is impacting that figure. I will say we have got a plasterer on board now, so I'm expected to see an improvement. And roofing, we're working more closely with some of our smaller enterprises locally to see if we can utilise those. I did put a bit there around the gas at the bottom there, the gas performance. Although gas doesn't directly come within my remit, I understand that there were some difficulties with the gas service provider the last time that we engaged with you. And I thought it would be useful just to highlight that appears to be back on track now with some good customer some good customer satisfaction along with completions within the target timescales. Finally, I just wanted to talk again, Paul mentioned it earlier, about the Sustainable Homes project. There's a lot of data on this slide. I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's there to peruse afterwards. But I think it's useful to say that, you know, this came about following a good working relationship, obviously, with Fenland District Council, who led the way in helping secure some funding to support this. And our Sustainable Homes are targeted around, the programme's targeted around two key principles in effect, and that's around providing energy cost reductions through enhanced insulation and, where applicable, improved heating mechanisms, but it's provided also for greater comfort, so it keeps properties warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. Just some numbers around that, because we're into the third phase now. We had the demonstrator phase, which in effect was the pilot, that completed 57 properties since 2021. Wave 1 completed 170 properties or homes since 2002, and Wave 2, which commenced in April last year, is due to have 49 complete by the end of March. And I think there's a bit on each of the waves there, but it's also here some really positive feedback from some of the residents and the difference that it's made to their fuel bills and also their comfort inside their properties. And I'll leave you to read that at your leisure. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Dan.
Quite a brief one from me, but some good news. We are about to start building 40 social rent homes in Springfield Avenue in March, 28 of which will be 2-bedroom houses and 12 will be 3-bedroom houses. We're using a fairly local, small-medium developer, Cox Edge building contractor, based out of Bury St Edmunds. This was planning approved in June 2023. We'll be starting on site in July 2024. We have already signed the contract with them. We're in this period now where they will be working on their working drawings, ensuring that all the planning requirements are in place before they start on site. And the homes will all be completed by March 2026. Some of those homes will hopefully be let earlier than that, as long as they're safe and secure to do so. And then just some images there. So if you don't know the site, it was owned by Clarion previously. It's just south of the cricket club in March. And if you look at the drawing on the right, it just shows the different house types there as well between the 2 beds and 3 beds. And the social rent, which is the lowest rent, affordable rent you can charge via government policy. And a big thanks to Homes England, who are helping us with some very much needed grant on those sites. On top of that, we continue to look for more opportunities to build in and around the Fenlands. We're talking to the national house builders who are building in this area about the Section 106 properties that will come available. And we're also talking to landowners and agents about smaller sites that we might be able to develop ourselves. Thank you.
All the others. Sorry, I forgot about this slide. There's a little bit from me about HomeLink. So just a reminder, Clarion manage HomeLink on behalf of Fenland District Council. Can you click? Thank you. So yeah, we manage the housing register on your behalf. So I've just included a slide there about some of what the numbers are looking like at the moment. I know that Dan and his team have been feeling pressures on the temporary accommodation, and that's reflected in the fact that demand for social housing is increasing, and you can see that there's been a sort of steady increase in numbers on the housing register, that has levelled off a little bit in terms of new applications. But compared to a few years ago, sort of since the pandemic, we've seen a steady increase in demand for social housing and the number of people on the housing register. So again, I've just put that there for your perusal, but to give you a bit of an indicator, and that's reflective. I think when we speak to other, we work with, obviously with lots of different local authorities, and when we speak to other local authorities, they're experiencing similar pressures on the social housing stock and on their local authority housing registers. Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Sally. So as I said in my introduction, I'm Yvonne Ogden. I'm the Communities Manager for Clarion Futures. We're the charitable foundation of the housing group, and we're here to provide people, residents in the wider community with the tools and support to help overcome any challenges and fulfil their potential. And we do this in a variety of ways, either by funding community projects and partners or helping people find jobs and training directly. We also help develop digital skills and manage their money. So just some headlines. This last year we've invested over £84,000 directly into our partners and communities, and that's enabled those partners to leverage a further £247,000 match funding, which has come directly into partners to deliver opportunities to residents and communities. Some of the ways that we've used this money has enabled us to deliver over 1,000 volunteering hours through our partners in Fenland. And just to say that for the last 5 years, we've also match-funded time credits for Cambridge County Council to ensure that delivery partners in Fenland can access time credits for their volunteers. And what that allows people to do is to exchange an hour's volunteering for a time credit, which then enables them to purchase back with those time credits things like swimming lessons or going to the cinema or online courses. So it's a really great way of us being able to add value to our volunteers in the area. Our youth partners across Wisbech, March and Whittlesea have engaged with over 1,289 young people, providing safe spaces to meet and activities to engage with. And some of those partners include Phoenix Youth in Whittlesea, Youth of Fenland in Chatterish in 2020 in March in Wisbech. And this year we've gone further. We've also provided additional funding to support children in year 4, 5 and 6 at Orchard with additional numeracy and literacy support through Tutors United. So we know that in Fenland, often numeracy and literacy levels are quite low. So we've worked with the Orchard School to be able to bring this additional support in. And Tutors United are a national organisation but work very locally. And we've seen some great results for some of those children. Obviously, as you all know, cost of living continues to be an issue for many. And this year we've provided support to over 2,500 families in Fenland. We've done this through providing funding and support to people like the Baby Bank, Fact, Caroline's Hot Foods and Seacorn, who have delivered our Warm Spaces project, cooking on a budget and food and essential item support to our residents and the wider community. So our Clarion digital team continues to provide residents with safe and secure access to training to get them online, and via our digital loan scheme we've given out over 42 devices and engaged 74 learners. And they've been supported by our digital champions who are volunteers, and we've delivered that at the Queen Mary Centre and the Ferry Project, and also across some of our Live Smart schemes. We've had 268 residents have been engaged with our money guidance team, and our money guidance team works specifically with our residents, and it's those residents that want to engage and want to see an improvement in how they're managing their money and how they're maximising their income. And 400 residents have accessed the local assistance scheme, which has resulted in over £10,000 worth of grants and vouchers for food and energy being awarded. So our jobs and training team, and they deliver directly with our residents and communities, have partnered with Wisbech Community Farm to deliver land-based skills with ASDAN qualifications in horticulture, grounds maintenance and equine welfare. And we've engaged over 85 people with skills training and supported 19 of those into work. We're delivering functional skills training to young people who are not in education, employment or training, as well as supporting schools with employability skills, including real hands-on experience. And a real example of that is that we partnered with our contractors Equine to create a safe site environment at the Oasis Centre in Wisbech, and we took year 10 children from Thomas Clarkson to give them the full experience of working on site and giving back to their community. And the feedback from both the school and young people was really great. So I hope that's given you a flavour of some of the great things we've been delivering either directly or via our partners across the area. And I'll just now pass back to Sally for our final slide.
So yeah, I just wanted to finish off by just highlighting another piece of work that we've been doing in collaboration with Fenland. And we work with lots of different local authorities, but Fenland will always be one of our key partner agencies that we work with. And this last year, we've, for example, because of the challenges you've been having with pressures in the housing register and more people in temporary accommodation, we've increase the number of leased units that we offer to you that you can then use for temporary accommodation. That's not something that we generally do, so it's a bespoke arrangement that we've come to with Fenland. But also, we're really proud of the sort of work we've been doing on the rough sleepers and next steps projects and Housing First. So just a bit of a reminder for you, we've been working closely for some time now with Fenland and the Ferry project, to build on what the Next Steps and Rough Sleepers project, which is around providing housing and tenancy related support to applicants who've got a history of rough sleeping and homelessness. So we were, with your help, we were successful in getting some Homes England grant funding, and we've purchased 10 homes in Fenland, 9 of which are currently occupied, and the 10th is just undergoing some final works. They'll be occupied very soon. And with a new customer, and the project, as I say, provides homes to customers who've never had or may have never had a home of their own before. You've got a history of rough sleeping, you've got a history of perhaps some really sort of challenging mental health problems, which has made it difficult for them to sustain a tenancy previously. The Ferry project provide the tenancy support, and the idea is that they work for them for 2 years. With that additional support, with a view to sort of then moving into permanent accommodation. So, and on a similar vein, we've been working with you on the Housing First scheme, which is a similar sort of client group. And the idea behind Housing First is you sort out somebody who's got perhaps complex history. You sort them out with the Housing First, and then figure out all the other support they need around that. So the Housing First approach, we've been working with you and the Housing First team on a similar vein, and offering individuals who are likely to have complex physical and mental health problems. And since starting that work, we've rehoused 8 Housing First applicants who have all been successfully maintaining their Clarion tenancies. 3 of those have gone on to get assured tenancies, so permanent tenancies, and that is largely down to that great partnership we've had with Fenland, with the Ferry project, because we've all had to work really, really closely together to make that happen. And that is the end of our presentation.
Hello, thank you for coming along and thank you for your in-depth presentation. I'd like to start with a question for Carl. I think I'm asking the right person. You mentioned that the subcontractors, you said you use the term rigorous in the procurement. How exactly are they procured? And also, a second question is, how are they held to standards? And what, if you can answer this, what percentage of agency operatives are currently working in Fenland? So sorry to bombard you with 3 questions there, 3 in 1.
Sorry, I was just writing those down so I could ensure that I give you the right answers. So yes, so we've recently been through a round of procurement. I say recently, probably 2 years ago now. And how we appoint our subcontractors is we break it, obviously because we're a national company, we break it into regions, and we invite subcontractors who have an interest on working for us to make an application. So that application is based on 2 key elements really. Obviously the one element of that is on price, and they price against, we have a National Housing Federation schedule of rates, which is a commonly used document for a number of local authorities and housing associations. We operate under volume 7.2. So the subcontractors are asked to bid against that with an idea of how much work we might be sending their way on a plus or minus rate. So that's element one of it, and that accounts for, on the latest round, that accounted for 60% of their scores. The second element is based around a number of quality questionnaires. So it looks at things around how they're going to set themselves up and gear themselves up to deliver services in our area. Examples of work that they've completed before and contracts that they've ran, how they will engage with our customers, how they'll meet their SLAs. So there's about 10 different criteria. Once that submission is in, there is a panel of people who will look at all of those quality submissions. They will review those and they will score them from 1 to 5, 1 being poor and 5 being good. The panel will agree on that overall score and do that for every subcontractor who's been in that region. That way we can get an agreed understanding and agreed submission of what their final score will be. So, and then the combination of the price and the quality will determine who we award that contract to. How they're held to account, there is a formal national subcontractor meeting with each contractor each month that's led by our internal procurement team, but has involvement from, for this area, myself and my area managers as appropriate. That's if the contractor's working well. If the contractor is causing us problems, we'll increase that number of meetings that we have with them, monitoring of them, and we'll set them targets to adhere to. We've only had to do that once in this area, and that was to our Clean and Clear contractor. So we've called them in more frequently. They've now improved their service and they're back to how we would want them to be performing. In relation to agency, for the subcontractors, I don't know how many they've got, but for us, we currently have no agency workers. All our workers are directly employed, all of our internal team.
Thank you very much. Do you know which department in Clarion is the largest user of agency staff?
I wouldn't be able to comment, sorry.
Okay, just to come back on the holding the subcontractors to account, you said through the monthly meetings, is that information that comes through from residents? How do you get that information about the subcontractors not meeting standards?
Okay, we have a process in place where we will post-inspect currently 10% of jobs completed by subcontractors. We've entered into a long-term partnership agreement with our subcontractors, so we don't want to be monitoring everything that they do, because we want to be able to work in conjunction together, because we feel that always gets the best benefits for both parties. However, if those post-inspections that we complete prove or show that that work isn't being completed to the standard that we want, we will engage further and post-inspect more of that work, and we will pull that into the meetings that we have, the formal minuted monthly meetings that we have nationally. Resident feedback does come into that, because the performance of the subcontractor is monitored in accordance with our own service level agreement. So, to respond to an emergency within 24 hours, a routine job within 28 days, and we manage that, and we can see those jobs that particularly fail. They're also subject to the random TLF, leadership factor, customer satisfaction surveys that come through. So if we've got poor scores that come into that from a subcontractor, we're able to pick that up and address those issues with them. But generally speaking, the customer or the resident will feed in directly if they're unhappy with the standard or level of work that's been provided to them.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that.
Can I just add a bit more? So obviously Carl's responded about his particular team. We do have specialist contractors for a range of work. So for example, we included the performance measures that we've got in place for Swale, who look after our gas and oil. We have lots of other specialist contractors that look after lifts, that look after air source heat pumps, that look after water testing. And we've got a similar sort of raft of performance targets for each of those. Some of those performance measures are included in our, quite a lot of them in fact, included in our Clarion commitments as well. So if you go onto the website, onto our Clarion commitments page, you'll see there's a section there on building safety. So there's a section there on, and again, similar sort of standards, how compliant we are, and that's another way that we measure their performance.
Thank you for that further explanation.
Councillor Booth?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come in on this subject as well, because I've had to raise a number of issues for a number of projects. I think they're predominantly net zero projects, actually. So Springfield Road, Garden Lane, which you had in your presentation. The issue to me appears to be, it's that you say you have these monitoring discussions, but it doesn't appear to be in real time, and you're not reacting in real time, as it were. So you say, you know, if residents raise issues, you'll respond, you've got a monthly process, but actually these issues are happening sort of on a daily basis. So particularly Springfield Road, I think that was supposed to be a fairly short-term project. It overran. Residents felt that they weren't being kept informed. Some of the stories I heard about what the contractors were or weren't doing was quite shocking. I obviously raised it through the process for councillors to raise complaints. That took about a month or so before I got a response back. Yeah, and all the while these issues are ongoing. So there appears to be a bit of a disconnect with your process, that it doesn't react in real time, as it were, to issues. And you know, particularly like the issue at Garden Lane, where I've been sort of trying to help a resident there. I mean, it's been getting on for 2 years now, I think, the issues. Can't be far off of it. And it's still not resolved, and they've been told something quite shocking about the fact, you know, not getting solar panels, which was, you know, something that was indicated to them at the outset. So the communication with residents, with what contractors are doing, is not up to scratch, I would say, particularly with the complaints I've had to raise on their behalf over this last year.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. I think that whilst the planned investment side of things don't directly fall within my remit, I do have a lot of engagement now with the planned investment team, and I have discussed these issues with them, particularly around some of those early properties where there were problems with it, and I think that's been acknowledged from the planned investment team. I do engage, as I say, directly with them in a lot more detail now, and I'm working more closely, and I've got some of my operative team engaged in some of that feedback as well. Whilst I can't provide an answer for you now, I'm happy to discuss it with you in more detail after this meeting, and I'm more than happy to take those points away to see if I can help resolve them.
So we look at this process around how you get feedback from residents, and particularly how you keep residents informed, because you know, some of the complaints I've been involved with, it seems to be, it's almost like one person deals with it one time, then someone else picks it up. They don't quite pass the same information on, or they don't quite understand exactly what's been said before. Then next time someone else deals with it, and you know, it's like Chinese whispers. As you're going through this chain, the residents are sort of getting told slightly different things every time, and it's not a great service. So I think something needs to be done to sort of improve that situation.
I'll just come in on this point. We're absolutely totally take on board what you've just said. We are in the process of reviewing how we manage complaints, so we'll make sure that all of your feedback is fed into that process.
Councillor Roy?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. There was lots of information in there. I think it would help councillors if we could have copies of those slides, because there was a lot of information in there. Probably a question for Yvonne. Are there surveys that you produce that engage the local communities? I understand that you have feedback from the residents that use your housing stock, but the communities around that housing stock, do you produce surveys and engage with them and interact and you know, to take action plans from there?
Thank you. Yes, so all of our communities work is across communities. We don't just work with our residents, we work with the wider community. All of our partners that we fund on the ground are organisations that are local and will engage with those residents for us to understand what the need is. Our resident involvement team will look at resident surveys, but wider than that, we're able to leaflet our areas, including those that are non-residents, to advertise the things that we're doing and to be able to engage them through that way.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Carney.
Just a question, I'm not sure which one of you two directed to, but I do know that neighbourhood response officers and the Live Smart scheme managers are the first point of contact between your tenants and obviously Clarion Housing. How much, with regard to the questions raised by Councillor Booth and Councillor Senate Club, how much involvement do they have with the subcontracting jobs anyway, or any sort of maintenance jobs? And also, do you feel there are enough of the NROs and Live Smart managers to oversee the number of properties you have within the district?
I'm just trying to think that we're currently looking at how we manage our frontline services. I mean, the NRAs and Live Smart managers don't typically get involved in that sort of contract stuff. That would sit with Carl, but they might, you're right, there might be the point of contact for the local team, and they'll be the one sort of helping to facilitate. So I do think that we have the right numbers, but I think, you know, we are looking at sort of that delivery model to see if we're getting it right, so that we can, and what we want to make sure we've got at the end of the day is the neighbourhood response officers and Live Smart managers are out and about as much as possible, and that's what our model is aiming to do and improve on.
Just to add on that, Councillor, if I may, I think in relation to the jobs that are required in the Live Smart schemes in particular, we've put a lot of processes in place recently to enable the Live Smart managers to raise works directly. So they have a system where they can raise a job directly through what's called our CFS, Clarion Field Services system. They can book a job in through an empty slot, and they can advise the resident while they're there. So it's made it a lot slicker and smoother process for them, rather than having to ring up our contact centre or go through an NRO or go through an area manager. So they're able to do that directly, which I think has made a bit of a difference.
Councillor Barber.
Thank you. I noted that on one of your Clarion commitments, number 4, said to maintain building safety. I'd like to ask you about Roman Court, which is a now redundant home for the elderly in Leverington. It's been empty for several years now. Nothing seems to be being done about it. And recently, a young child was inside, fell down a hole. I think it was some kind of cover over something. He fell down, wasn't hurt particularly, but it's obviously now a danger to the public. Something needs to be done as soon as possible, really. It is several years now, it's been empty. Either demolish it or repurpose it, but please, something needs to be done.
So yeah, so that's been through an options appraisal and a policy that has taken a bit longer than we'd like to done. So we're working with officers and we're hoping to come back with a final solution on that in the next 3 months. So yeah, it's unfortunate it's happened. I'll pick up, I didn't realise about the child, so I will understand about that in a bit more detail. But yeah, that's been through the options appraisal now, and we'll have an outcome in that in the next 3 months.
And just to add, we have staff on site on a regular basis checking it. We've got security patrols regularly going as well out of in the evenings and weekends just to check on the safety, so we can. I was aware of that particular incident, so we've made a note of that particular incident.
So the fence that you put up has come down. Are the security people not checking that that's needing to be redone?
I can't comment on that particular, so yes, we need to take that away and have a look at it.
Councillor Voicebird.
Hi, this is a question for Yvonne. It's great to see all the projects that Clarion Futures have been delivering across Fenland. I'm just wondering, is there, I know you touched on this briefly,
about a community engagement. Is there like a process? How do you come to decide what projects or training go where? I wonder if there's a process to that. If you could expand on that, please. Thanks.
Yes, certainly. So we will look at a variety of different indicators as to where we're putting the money that we have with Futures and what that will deliver. And that will go right from looking at things like community insight, indices of deprivation, left behind areas to really hone in where we should be focusing. Then on a more local level, we will work with our partners to understand what the need is in an area. We will work with our resident involvement team to understand what our residents need. More practically than that, we're very eyes on. So we have an officer in Fenland who will work with our partners on the ground, who is out and about and who can see what happens. We also obviously work with our housing colleagues who will raise issues or things that we can engage with. There are some national things that we are able to bring into a local area, so things like the Tutors United that we've offered to Orchard. That's a national contract that we have with those, and we worked with Orchard School to identify that. We also had an issue raised through Orchard around some young people's antisocial behaviour on Lime Avenue, so we've worked with the school and a local youth sports organisation to be able to engage those young people and look at diversion reaction. So we try and be as responsive as we can be. Things like our Community Ambassador Programme, again, is a national programme, but we've delivered very successfully locally. In fact, the Fenland, through 2020 Productions, the Community Ambassador Programme here is the largest one we've ever run anywhere in the country. So it's a combination of things, but we like to be responsive and reactive. We like to understand what's going on the ground. We do feel that our community partners are the best people to tell us that, because they work directly with our communities and have the trust of the community to be able to understand what's needed.
That's amazing, thank you. Do you collate? Do you evaluate afterwards and collect this information? And if so, are you able to share some success stories or not success stories? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so all of our partners report on a quarterly basis, and we have a range of numerical KPIs around numbers that are engaged, number of volunteers, number of volunteering hours, number of people that progressed into employment or into training. So we gather that, but broader than that, and probably most important to us, is that insight, so case studies where things have happened, where people have had success stories, and then at the end of a project period, and that could be 12 months, it could be a 12-week programme. So for example, Holiday Hunger, we might be doing something over the summer term. We will evaluate that programme with that partner to look at whether or not it's delivered what we wanted it to, what the learning has been, and often there's very often additionality there that we weren't aware of, and so we do capture that, and that usually comes out through either our media case studies or our social media, but we're happy to provide an overview of kind of the work that we've done. I do have that in an investment page that I can share with you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much, thank you.
I actually happened to bring a copy of our Resident Involvement Impact Assessment, which covers the whole of Clarion, but I thought you might be interested in having a look at it because it gives some sort of good news stories about it. It's not obviously specific to this local authority area, but just lets you know how we've involved our residents and how they've helped shape services. So I'll let you have a copy of that. No worries.
Councillor Seneca.
Thank you, Chair. So really to follow on from Councillor Forrest-Beard's question, often with sort of quasi-national government organisations and stuff, we hear the term engaged and engagement a lot. So this is really a question for you, Yvonne. What does that mean? You say 1,289 young people were engaged. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting term, engaged, isn't it? And I'd be lying if I said we've not spent a lot of time throwing around what that means. But for us and these particular young people in Fenland, it means that they are engaged directly with one of our partners on the ground. So they're either attending one of their youth sessions, they're attending one of the Tutors United sessions, they're attending the Wisbeach Community Farm. They are physically, actually engaged in that process. So it's not a case of turn up, have a hot dog and say hi. They're actually engaged and being supported and involved.
That's really reassuring. And just on the back of that, a question I have for you, or potentially Sally. Do you still have resident liaison officers that talk to residents in the community? Are they still being used? And if so, can you talk about the effectiveness of those? Thank you.
So we have neighbourhood response officers. They're the frontline teams that the staff at their residency when they're out and about. So they're the point of contact when it comes to community engagement and things like that. They're tasked to respond to complaints of antisocial behaviour. They're tasked to initiate any community engagement, working in partnership with Yvonne. And that's the team that I was saying, you know, our mission is to get them out and about as much as possible and make them visible. So they'll also be, you know, checking estates to make sure that their cleaning contractors are doing their job, and things like that.
So how would you rate the effectiveness? I mean, it sounds effective from what you've described, but would you agree that it's effective?
We rate the effectiveness, I guess, through customer satisfaction, and customers are generally speaking quite satisfied with our service. So that, again, that's probably it's worth taking a look at the Clarion commitments, because that gives a range of ways in which we monitor and manage our services, and there are there's some particular measures on there around engagement and community, how we're looking after our estates as well, which is another way we sort of measure our success. So there's a range of measures on there around looking after our communal areas, managing antisocial behaviour.
Thank you.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. Quick 3 questions. First one on antisocial behaviour. This in practice seems to be very long-winded, takes an awful lot of time, and is very distressing to the victims. Do you have any measures in place, or can you, or any tools you can use for quicker resolution of this? And secondly, do you have any figures on such events and cases? How long did they take to resolve? Question 2 is bringing the houses in disuse back into use. What tools do you have at your disposal to bring them back into use of privately owned houses that have fallen into disrepair? Well, you can answer these 2 if you like. You obviously have it ready. I'll keep the third one till the end. Thank you.
So the management of privately owned properties wouldn't fall under the remit of Clarion Housing. Obviously, as you know, we've talked a little bit about how we manage our own housing stock, and we've certainly got a very clear targets around reletting any properties that become empty, which are referenced in the occupation charges, numbers. In terms of how we manage antisocial behaviour, there's lots of different ways that you can measure antisocial behaviour. So we do look, for example, at the length of time that a case is opened. You're right to say that cases can be complicated and drawn out. Every single case that gets reported to us, we will be talking to the complainant about what the solutions we propose are, and the sorts of tools that we might have is to talk to them, to talk to the other party. We'll offer things like mediation if there is a dispute sometimes between parties. And we a lot of our antisocial behaviour cases, the best tool we've got is to talk to other agencies involved in those, either individuals or so, for example, we'll talk to Fenland about some cases, we'll speak to the police about some cases to make sure that we're all working in partnership to try and find solutions. In a very small minority of cases, we've got the option of legal tools, which would be an injunction, either, for example, stopping somebody doing something or stopping somebody going somewhere, and or possession action where we evict customers. Obviously, we don't like to use those very often, and it's not very easy to use those tools very often. The bar is quite high. So the best work we can do is work with our customers, with other agencies, to try and find solutions.
So in other words, there is no quick resolution. In real life, I know people have actually become mentally ill because of the distress caused. Very often it starts with noise and then it escalates into, I don't know, personal feud even. And it is the perpetrators are capable and actually do take such extreme measures as to make life impossible for the victim. What you're telling me is there's no quick resolution possible. So what you described is fairly long-winded, unfortunately. Aren't there any emergency measures you could take?
We risk assess each case to start with. So the first thing we do when we get a case in is risk assess it. And as if there's any threat of violence, then we'll respond more quickly. So a typical example would be a victim of domestic abuse. We will be speaking to them within 24 hours of them telling us about that. And there are, in certain circumstances, you can get an injunction very quickly, but that tends to be cases where there is, again, fear of violence. It's cases where a typical example might be where there's work going on by the police to manage sort of some drug dealing, and might be able to get an injunction, but they are few and far between, that sort of speedy response, and it's still not particularly quick. Which is why what we aim to do is have really good working relationships with other agencies to try and manage the most complex cases. So we do feel we've got that with Fenland and with the local police.
Thank you. Third question, Chair. On net carbon zero, you've mentioned insulation and so on. What about the installation of solar panels? Do you have a program in place? What extent, what sort of budget do you have for that? Thank you.
So we do, so as part of the Clarion 2050 strategy, solar very much plays its part in that. We've recently just had all of our roofs across the whole organisation mapped. We got that information a couple of weeks ago, so we now know for every house pitch, direction, overhang, shading, and more importantly, what output it can have. So part of the strategy sets out that all roof replacements from next year forwards will be considered to have PV. So some of the PV installations that were done in the demonstrator phase here in Fenland had the inline solar put in as part of the roof, which is our preferred option. From a maintenance perspective, cost effective, from a customer perspective, that is the way we'd like to go. All of our roofs are due to be replaced between now and 2050. They typically have a 60-year life cycle, so there's a separate work stream that will then be had where we will have solars being planted on top of existing roofs, and of course all the structural surveys and necessary checks will be done before we do that. So yes, we very much see solar as one of the keys to unlocking that, along with the battery storage side of things. And it's also a good in for us about how we access private finance in order to pay for this. So the solar with the battery storage and how we work with energy companies and different solutions is very much central to how we deliver our net zero programme.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Carney.
Yes, I can confirm that part of the process when they do their checks or visits to a property is that they should, at a minimum, be placing a battery-powered carbon monoxide detector in place, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Fidden.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Carl. This question's for you, and it's about maintenance works. Is there a method of, say, for example, a portal where tenants can log their complaints online? The reason I'm asking this is just in addition to what Councillor Booth said earlier. My experience with my constituents is when they call up and report an issue, they speak to one person, and then they get told someone will get back to them. And if someone does or someone doesn't, the next time they call up, they have to recount the issue all over again. Now, from my experience in the private rental sector, when some of the agents I use, for example, they have like a portal where complaints are logged. Now, access to this portal, landlords have access to it, and tenants have access, and agents have access. So everyone knows where we're at, where the progress, whether a contractor has been appointed, when they're coming, when the job will be done, if there are delays in ordering materials, and so on. Everyone knows what's going on. So when someone calls up, they don't have to recount the issue from beginning. That's one part of it. Secondly, you did mention about works that are being done to improve the energy efficiency of your units, you build your properties. How long does it take? What is the period from, say, let's say a double glazed unit, or say UPVC doors? How long, what's their lifespan? When do you replace them? Because I also have people in my constituency who have very, very, yes, the flats are double glazed, but they're so old that it doesn't provide enough protection from the elements when it gets really cold. My question now is when are these things, what's their lifespan? When do they get replaced? Thank you.
Thank you very much. On point one, residents are able to log a repair directly online. It's through a system called Oreo, and it's been in place now.
So it's called what?
Oreo. I think it's been in place now for a good 12 months. So it allows the resident to log onto the system. They can identify what their repair is that is required. So we use a simple one that their door's sticking, they need their door ease and adjusting. There's prompts in there to show them what they need to put down as that repair, and they can even book a slot for it, so they can identify they'll be able to see our availability and be able to book a slot that is convenient for them to manage that process. So yes, hopefully that answers part one of your question. Part two, around energy efficiency. We do have ongoing stock condition surveys which look at identifying the remaining life of key components within properties, but generally speaking, and it depends on region, and it depends on how they're maintained and looked after, is we will look at 25 to 30 years as a typical lifespan for a UPVC window or composite door. However, there are instances where failures are quicker than that, and where that is the case, we do look at those and survey those properties. If we can't service them, because we do look at repairing rather than replacing wherever possible. If we can't repair them, we will look at replacing individual properties. If it's a whole scheme, as an example, so we've got, 30 properties in a scheme that all have failed and need replacing, that will result in a referral, which we'll put through to our planned investment team, who can then programme those works in. But generally speaking, if you've got odd individual properties that are suffering, I will pick that up with my team through our own responsive repairs service.
Thank you. And also, if you don't mind, I would like to have your contact details. One of the questions I wanted to ask as well is there, there are public access numbers and emails for everyone, tenants to contact you guys on. But when it comes to councillors, the tenants kind of expect us, the constituents, expect us to have, like, I don't know, superpower, so that we have specialist direct line, like a direct line phone number to you guys. Now, is there something like that? Is there a way we can have that made available to us.
Yeah, I'll pick this one up. So there's a dedicated email group that you can contact. So I don't know if you have that. If not, then we can forward the email to you so that you get kind of a fast track into us.
Thank you. And one more thing, Chairman, sorry. I would like to discuss a specific case with you of a constituent of mine who has been waiting for 3 years, over 3 years, for a wet room to be placed in her property for her disabled daughter, if you don't mind. Absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor Booth?
Yeah, I mean, just pick up on that point about the contact number. Yes, there is this email, but I think, and it was raised last year about the sort of slow response times we're getting to those initial requests that we put in. It can take 2 to 3 weeks on average, I would have said, and sometimes it takes longer if it's a more complicated issue. So, yeah, we're getting pressure from our residents to try and get things done, and we use this dedicated email line, and we'll probably get an acknowledgement within a few days, and then we're waiting for some time to get an actual substantial sort of answer. If we have to come back to you, it's like another couple of weeks. So it's just not a very good streamlined process. And it's probably frustrating residents more than anything, as well as frustrating us, because we can't get these issues dealt with in a timely manner. So I guess what we're asking is, can we look at that, and is there another way that we can actually engage with you, because it's been in place for several years now. I'm probably one of the most frequent users of it, I imagine, it's not responsive enough in my opinion.
Okay, it's useful feedback. We'll take that on board. Thank you.
So you treat everything as if it's a complaint. Sometimes it's not a complaint, it's an inquiry. So it goes through your complaints process when it doesn't necessarily need to be treated as a complaint. So,
yeah, useful feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Roy?
Thank you, Chair. Probably Kirsty's the best one to answer this one. It may be useful for councillors and your liaison officers, I think Councillor Senate-Clough brought it up, to improve that communication. I think if the liaison officers knew who the local ward councillors are, often, as Councillor Mifton has highlighted, residents will come to us their first port of call if they're not sure and they're not computer literate, or for other reasons they're not able to. And yes, sometimes we will email you directly, but as Councillor Booth has identified, that can take a little bit of time. And it can be simple things where we can go to the local officer and say, look, this needs sorting, can you feed it up the line, and can we do something about it? So I think certainly that would work good for Clarion and certainly for the councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so totally take on board what you're saying. At the moment, we're not quite there, so I don't know if you know about the way we work. So we have our neighbourhood response officers that kind of work on the ground, but behind them are central teams that are sort of managing to work in a process-driven way. So if somebody rings up to say, "Oh, I want to mutually exchange my property," there would be a team that would deal with that, and then they would task the local team to go out. It's not that we acknowledge that it's not that efficient, and there's probably a better way that we could do things. So that is something that we're looking at, which would address those issues that you're talking about.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Booth?
Thank you, Chair. I've raised this probably a couple of years ago originally, but it's around the properties at Forney Toll and the empty properties. Now, I have had an update from Dan a few months back about it, but the issue was raised again recently with St Mary Parish Council, that although you've committed to repair a lot of those and get them back into good order, they still remain empty, and the work just seems to have almost come to a halt, and it isn't progressing. I think the idea was you were starting at one end and sort of moving along, but that doesn't really appear to be materialising now, and there's rubbish from the gardens that get complaints from residents. So what is the situation, and how can we expedite what's happening there?
So similar to Roman Court, and apologies that this has taken too long. So again, the outcomes of that, the options appraisal has now been done, and the outcomes of that will be concluded in the next 3 months around what we're going to do with that asset along very well.
Right, so my understanding was that there's pretty much agreement in place already, so you're saying that's not the case now, because I thought that some properties were going to be taken on by Fenland Council, and then the others would be sort of brought back into use, and you were possibly going to dispose of a couple.
And broadly speaking, that's still the principles. It's just the exact numbers and how that's all going to look just need to be bottomed out. And as I say, that's going to be over the next 2 to 3 months.
I'd say I'm a little bit disappointed with that response, given raised this issue, say, over the last couple of years. It's just, you know, we've got empty properties there. We've got 1,700 people on the waiting list, and you know, people could have been housed there. It could have been used. It's a small, you know, village hamlet, you know, and it's, you know, with the fact that the properties are empty, it's almost taken the soul out of the place, because you know it hasn't got a thriving community like you'd want to see there.
Yeah, and as I say, I acknowledge that it has taken too long, and apologies for that. But as I say, the timelines that we've talked about are those that we're working towards now.
When you have to resettle a family, what weight is given to trying to keep them in the same locality, so that you don't have instances where very often they don't have access to a vehicle and they've now got to take the children 15 miles to go to school? What weight do you actually put on trying to keep them in the same area?
So the vast majority of our homes are let through HomeLink, and anybody who applies to HomeLink will go into a banding, so dependent on their particular needs. That then means that they can bid on HomeLink on whatever property they choose. So it puts the ownership in their hands to make those decisions.
Yeah, but that's sort of made up of points. What I'm trying to get at is just how much weight is actually put onto trying to keep them local.
I mean, obviously, the choice-based letting system, it's a really good way of allocating homes, because the choice is with the individual as to where they can then bid for homes, so they can choose what properties they're bidding. It's a very transparent system.
And just, sorry, Councillor Booth, go on.
Sorry. Yeah, there's just a couple of other points just wanted to raise. So you gave some very brief information about, well, it's gas stroke oil. Now, my understanding was that Swale dealt primarily with gas in the past in the presentations. So, and I've asked specifically for information regarding oil-fired boilers, particularly for the rural area here in Fenland. But is Swale now dealing with the oil-fired boilers, or are they effectively subcontracting that out? Because my understanding was you had to get specialist companies in to deal with that.
It's a really good question. I don't know the answer, but I will find out and report back on that.
Final question? Yeah. And then the final question is just about, you know, future development. So you've talked about the sort of Springfield development that's ongoing. In past presentations, we've had sort of an idea of what the future might hold. You sort of indicated that there's discussions, but not, I guess, the quantum of what number of houses you might be able to bring into, you know, into line to help, you know, with our backlog. Obviously, the 1,700 isn't the sole responsibility of Clarion, but you are the major social housing provider in Fenland. So, you know, some of that obviously does fall on your shoulders, but, you know, how many do you think you've got in the pipeline over, say, the next 2, 3, 5 years?
That's a really difficult question to answer in that we have none others that are under any form of contract that I would be able to say for sure will happen in the near future. But we do continue to look for Fenland. When we look at where our stock is allocated, Fenland remains an area we want to develop in. There are other local authorities that we're withdrawing from, that we won't work in anymore because we don't have enough stock there. With the quantum of stock we've got in Fenland, it makes it a very attractive place for us to build new homes. It's just finding them and making sure that the contract works for Clarion to make those developments happen. But rest assured, we are looking in Fenland and aim to build homes here, if at all possible.
And are you in discussions for any other major developments, even if they're at very early stages and haven't got to the contract stage, I guess is.
So we do, that is the majority. Other landlords aren't buying it and to relet. It's interesting. I'd like to know actually the reasons why. I don't think we know why that is, and it might be something that actually we need to find out, because you would have thought, or you would speculate, given the rental prices, particularly in sort of the Wisbech area, you can achieve pretty good rental dividends. Why is it that they aren't? You know, well, I know you're a councillor, I'm having to shake his head, but £900 for a 3-bedroom house is quite a lot of money. And given that they've bought it so cheaply compared to other areas, so say, for example, a property in March is much more expensive and you achieve less rent. So what is it that we're not seeing as to why people aren't sort of, the other landlords aren't coming in? You know, some of it might be about demand, because I know there was a lot of demand for HMO properties, and now people are getting a lot of voids there and don't seem to be wanting to do that. Obviously, with energy prices going up as well, are you going to be wanting to pay the bills when the energy prices have pretty much doubled? So there is some of that, but I think we need to understand why they aren't looking to buy and relet.
Councillor Bowden, you wanted to add?
Yes, we're in danger of getting into national trends here. And one of the reasons is that there have been changes to regulations, both in tax and potentially elsewhere, which have been disadvantageous to private landlords, particularly on the tax side. And especially for smaller private landlords, a good number of them right across the country have decided the game's just not worth playing. And they have therefore decided to sell. And as far as they're concerned, they'd be perfectly happy to sell to another landlord or to the open market. It's just that the demands from the open market have been far greater than the demands from other landlords. So the net, there are always pluses and minuses. There are always properties which are going from being in private accommodation to becoming landlord-owned and vice versa. But the tendency, the trend has been, not merely in Fenland, but right across the country, for the supply of properties being held by private landlords be going down.
And another observation, is it that maybe we're seen as a cheaper area, so more people trying to get rented accommodation in Fenland and sort of moving into the area, putting more pressure on our housing stock? Is that a potential issue that we might be experiencing?
I think what doesn't help is the being a cheaper area, because we've got quite a lot of big houses that are perfect for, like you say, HMOs, perfect for private care homes, you know, asylum seeker accommodation. That's obviously why we've had the big issue there, where we've had to say, actually, we don't want asylum seekers in cheaper areas, because it is causing, adding to the social problems in that area. And the reason, you know, we think the Home Office and Serco are picking places that are in cheaper areas is because obviously it doesn't cost them as much to buy and place people there.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you. If I may try to answer Councillor Booth's if I may, his question. Councillor Hoy is absolutely right that part of the reason is over-regulation in the housing market by the government. They are, in that sense, shooting themselves in the foot. And the other part is what Councillor Bowden said, the taxation changes, which means it is no longer that attractive for private landlords to invest in these housing. As to where that stock has gone, some of the stock is in limbo, in the process of being sold. Some has fallen into sort of disuse and disrepair, and some has been occupied by the newcomers from abroad, particularly from Eastern Europe, and what they're tending to do is to share. So two families may be able to share a house so that they can afford it. You know, the cousin or the brother, the sister, they're two families. They tend to do that. And that is the only way that some of the landlords can afford to stay in business. So these are the reasons. My question, which I had for Councillor Hoy, seems to have dissipated now. So may I return to that at a later stage, please?
Are there any more questions on housing?
I was just going to add to what Councillor Hoy said. I wasn't disagreeing with you when I was shaking my head. What I was trying to say was that there, like Councillor Borden said, there's a lot of reasons. One of them that we haven't mentioned, I think, is high interest rates as well. It has affected a lot of private landlords. Private landlords who have been historical landlords for a long time, who probably had fixed interest rates, have discovered that when those rates come to an end, it goes to a variable rate. Standard variable rate at the moment is about 7.5%, and that on and also you have to understand a lot of landlords who have buy-to-lets, they are mainly on interest-only mortgages. They are non-repayment mortgages. So by the time these rates come to an end and it reverts to standard variable rates, you're finding out that even if you charge £900 a month for, I don't know, a 3-bed, and if your outstanding mortgage is say £100,000, you don't get a lot of return. By the time you meet all the other regulations and you pay your taxes, and even if you're a limited company or a sole trader as a landlord, it does affect you. There's the government regulations as well that's come into play. There's the new, thankfully, Rishi Sunak did go back on the insulation policy that was going to come into effect in a few years' time, where every house had to be brought to a certain EPC. I think it had to be C. But now that has been done away with. That has helped a few landlords. People are getting rid of their portfolio because it is just not viable anymore. So then again, it is the government shooting itself in the foot. That's what's happening.
No, I think that's a really good point about the interest rates, and I think you're right about the EPC thing as well, because if you look at a number of the old sort of Victorian-style terrace houses, I don't know how they would ever achieve an EPCC. So I do think the government kind of often makes these policies and very short-termist and don't think. And I think, without trying to kind of give anyone too much work, we've never really done, and I don't even know how you do it, but any kind of like overview work on the whole system, because it isn't just everyone plays a part. So the private sector plays a part, Clarion plays a part, temporary accommodation, B&B, there's all these different parts of the system. And any time someone makes a decision in any part of that system, it always has these knock-on effects that sometimes people say no one thinks about. I'm sure people do think about, but sometimes you can't. There's always unforeseen consequences of any decision that's made. And yeah, I just think the whole thing actually is really quite an interesting topic, because I think for a long time, many people, councils, governments have made almost private landlords into sort of the demons that are making all this money and they're not helping. They aren't. They're a massive, actually big part of the system, because without them, we don't have the housing for other people to move into. And, you know, not everyone can afford to buy. I mean, they're talking about these shared ownership properties. I don't think they're all they're cracked up to be honest, looking at them. The things that the thresholds you've got to meet to be able to be eligible for them are quite high. I don't sit here professing to have all the answers, because I don't think anyone does. And a lot of it's above our pay grade, you know, as Chris mentioned, national policy affects a very great deal of it.
Councillor Bowden.
Councillor Hoy is entirely correct in saying that it is quite complex and there are a lot of moving parts, many of which interact with each other. But if you wish to really get down to the basics of it all, there simply aren't enough properties, there simply aren't enough houses. And it doesn't matter how you slice and dice it, ultimately that is the issue. Governments of all parties have recognised this for decades and have failed to ensure that sufficient numbers of new properties have been built year on year, of whatever tenure you want to talk about, but they've failed to ensure that sufficient have been built in order to meet the demand which exists. So given that, somewhere, somehow, the system squeezes people out. And we're increasingly finding that they're being squeezed out at the bottom of the market, those who are dependent upon private rented accommodation, those who find themselves in a situation where they can no longer afford their home. That's where the squeeze takes place. Some of that finds its way into statutory homelessness, where we have a statutory duty to house people. Others don't. But take it down to the basics, there aren't enough houses in the country.
Councillor Roy.
Thank you, Chair. It's clear that there is a need for housing, but as I drive around the districts, I do find large areas, certainly in my ward, we've got 2, where there are derelict buildings and we're not actioning those quick enough to get them demolished and replaced with housing. We've got areas now with the incinerator coming, there's going to be companies coming in using prime development land for housing for simple things like parking, which we just don't really need at the moment. Is there any policy that we can accelerate some of these? Well, they've been going on for a number of years, and Dan knows that, you know, Strathmore House is one of them in Elm. I think there needs to be a little bit more pressure put on those owners that have left areas undeveloped, and you know, we could be putting valuable housing on. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bowden.
Well, the way in which things work, we can't force many people to do anything at all. If people own property to a significant extent, they can do what they with what they wish with it, or not, as the case may be. There are some exceptions, but generally, if someone doesn't want to develop a brownfield site, we can't force them to develop a brownfield site. However, what we can do, and we will have this opportunity over the next 6-9 months, I'm not sure of the exact timescale, what we can do is to look at our draft local plan, so that when we are finally going to agree as a council to present it as a draft local plan to the inspector, that we take advantage of any opportunities that there may be to highlight specific areas which may not be specifically designated, to ensure that they do get development designation. So I think that what we can do to a great extent is look at our draft local plan and see if we can influence things that way. So far as properties, residential properties which are empty is concerned, we do have an officer who has been dealing with this over the course of several years now, and work is always done to ensure that where it is possible, those properties are brought back into use. Now, there is a penal system of additional council tax for empty properties which are allowed to remain empty beyond 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and so on. And it's necessary for people to pay greater and greater percentages of council tax on properties which remain empty. And we have taken the decision in Fenland to maximise those multiples, so as to maximise the incentive for people to get properties back in use. But there are exceptions. One of the worst being, and there are lots of them surprisingly, the number of properties where the owner has died and the executor hasn't applied for probate. And that's a wide open loophole, which means that the requirement not merely to pay the multiples of council tax, but to pay any council tax at all on those properties is completely lost. And I've been astonished by the number of these. Councillor French sitting next to me knows 1 or 2 in her own ward, which are particularly bad examples of this. And some of these are actually literally going to rack and ruin, much to the disgust and disquiet of the immediately neighbouring properties. And there is very, very little that we can do. Very little.
French, you wanted to say?
Yes, thanks. Can you remind me, Strathmore House in Elm, was that a residential home? And it is a listed building? Right, I will tell you there's a section 215 and a section 216 of the Planning Act being served. The 215 has already been served. I will chase that up.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you. This is a question. What criteria determines that the council has a statutory duty to house a particular person or a family?
So anyone can apply to be on HomeLink, but obviously if, say for example, I applied, obviously I'm not going to, but just using it as an example, I would obviously get an exceptionally low banding. If someone can be in what's called a priority need, and that's a very specific definition. I won't give you the exact definition because I will undoubtedly get it wrong, but it looks at things like whether they have a health issue, overcrowding. There's various things that the team have to look at and categorise to get that banding. But if they aren't in priority need, we don't necessarily have a statutory duty to house them. However, that doesn't mean we won't help. So we do have stuff like with the Trailblazer service where people can contact us, and we will help them with things like helping to potentially look for private rented properties, perhaps looking at whether they can be, if they've got rent arrears, are they eligible for any kind of discretionary housing payments, things like that. So just because you're not in priority need, it doesn't mean our door is closed, but it does mean that we don't necessarily have a statutory duty to house you. So, but yeah, that's it's a national kind of guidance, but that we have to then work on, and officers work on.
Thank you.
Right. Are there any more questions on housing? Because I'm conscious that there are other things in this report that we need to move on, but I don't want anybody to miss out on asking a question. We're fine. Questions not about housing then, please. I'll start off then. We've got the, I'm moving on to like leisure centres now. So we've got the issue that the Peterborough Regional Pool is now closed. Chatteris, the swimming pool there, is now closed. So are we finding that we're getting the take-up of those people coming into any of the leisure centres? Do you know?
Unfortunately, Councillor Miss Candlin's on holiday, but I'm here to answer your question. Yes, we have got more people coming to the George Campbell in March for swimming lessons, and certainly Freedom are taking advantage of the fact that those pools are closed, and it's the same in Whittlesea as well. Certainly the City of Peterborough Swimming Club used to use the regional pool a heck of a lot. They've been using our Manor Leisure Centre for quite a while, but they're hoping to increase the number of sessions they have there.
Councillor Bowden.
And from the point of view of our facilities, what has also been useful in terms of take-up has been that some of the Peterborough schools have also been going to Whittlesea and have been taking their swimming lessons there. So yes, there has been a distinct increase in the amount of usage in our area because of the closure of the pool in Peterborough.
Councillor Bowden.
Does that mean there's more restrictions on when the public can use it if groups are putting bookings in, and is that impacting Fenland residents being able to go and swim?
I've asked for more information from Freedom actually, but they've been pretty sensible in terms of allowing public swimming from time to time, because what we don't want is swimming lessons all the time, swimming club all the time. There needs to be a mix that suits everyone.
Yes, my understanding, the deadline for everything to be clear, I'm talking about all the nits and gritty and all the bit, is the 21st of October. Yes.
So The next item on the agenda for members is an update on previous actions identified, and I'm pleased to see that there is currently nothing outstanding. Agenda item 9 is the Future Work Programme, and that's at pages 35 to 42 of the pack. The Future Work Programme sets out the planned business for the panel up to April 25. Are there any questions or suggestions in relation to the Future Work Programme which are not currently being discussed? I know we've got a few things floating around, but not. Councillor Nawaz.
I suppose that's in the process. I did request a presentation by the officials from the counties or whoever is in charge of education. Was it some time back?
That's what I said. That's already in discussion, but obviously we've got to try and find a way to build that into the actual programme. So,
okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor French.
Just to give you a heads up, the head of education has now left, I believe, and somebody else is in place.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it would be welcome if we could actually get somebody here.
Yeah.
Because there's many issues.
I
mean,
absolutely.
we've got our special education school in March.
We are actually discussing how we can move different presentations around to try and get something in.
I mean, I did read the other day they're sending children 17 to 20 miles to travel to school, which is absolutely appalling.